I installed security cameras to stop someone from stealing a $12 package off my porch. 8 months later, they caught something worth a lot more. I was sitting in a conference room in Denver when it happened. Third row, ballroom C, a panel on pediatric swallowing disorders I wasn't really listening to. That's when my phone buzzed. Motion alert. Camera 2. Now, camera 1? That's the front porch. Delivery drivers. Stray cats. The occasional raccoon. Camera 3? Back door. But camera 2? Is inside. Nothing triggers camera 2 unless someone is standing in the middle of my living room. I opened the app under the table. Casual. Like checking a text you don't want anyone else to see. The thumbnail loaded. Blurry. A figure. Inside my house. Blonde. I tapped it. And there she was. My younger sister Madison walking across my living room like she owned it. Carrying a box. Setting it down on my coffee table. The one I spent an entire weekend restoring because I couldn't stand the water stains the previous owner left behind. She pulled out her phone. Dialed someone. Didn't hesitate. Didn't look around. Didn't act like she wasn't supposed to be there. Because in her mind, she wasn't. Then she said something that rewired the next 3 months of my life. Dad's lawyer is putting it in my name. She'll never get us out. She laughed. Not nervous. Not unsure. Comfortable. Like the outcome had already been decided. I watched the clip once. Then again. Then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I wanted the timestamp. March 12th. Uchonia de Peme. I noted it the way I note clinical observations. Date, time, behavior, context. Because that's what I do. I don't react. I document. The panel kept going. Someone behind me unwrapped a cough drop. A woman to my left kept taking notes like nothing in the world had changed. And technically, it hadn't. Not for them. But in 15 seconds, my entire understanding of my family did. Because here's the part you need to understand. I bought that house myself. At 26, no cosigner, no help, no family money. I refinished the floors on my hands and knees. I built the shelves in the living room from reclaimed wood. I installed the porch swing my mother once said she always wanted. Even though she sat on it twice. I built a home. And while I was sitting in that conference room, my family was inside it, reassigning ownership. Legally, quietly, confidently, like I was just a detail they had already worked around. I closed the app, sat still, hands steady, breathing even, because reacting would mean deciding what to do. And I wasn't there yet. I was still observing, still collecting, still building the system. But one thing was already clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a boundary issue. This was something else, something colder. Because the people who raised me weren't just crossing a line, they were trying to erase it. And they made one mistake. They assumed I was still the same person they had always known. The practical one. The one who adjusts. The one who absorbs. The one who gets over it. They were right about one thing. I am practical. I just don't forgive without evidence. Before the cameras, before the footage, before that one sentence changed everything, nothing felt wrong. That's what makes systems like this so dangerous. They don't feel toxic. They feel normal. If you asked anyone what my role in the family was, they'd probably say, she's the reliable one. She's got her life together. She doesn't need help. It sounds like respect. It sounds like independence. It's not. It's permission. Permission to lean on you without asking. Permission to assume you'll handle things. Permission to stop checking if you're okay, because you always seem fine. That was me. Not the favorite. Not the difficult one. The stable one. The one who didn't create problems, which, over time, turned into the one who quietly solved them. My parents, Diane and Robert, never asked me for money. That's the part people always misunderstand. They didn't have to. Because when something came up, a repair, a bill, a temporary gap, it would just get handled, not through conversations, through silence. A problem would exist. I would notice it, and then I would remove it. No acknowledgement. No discussion, just resolution. At first, it felt like maturity, like I was stepping up, like I was being the kind of person who made things easier for everyone. And for a while, I was. But over time, something shifted. The problems didn't decrease. They stabilized because they were no longer urgent. They were expected. My sister Madison adapted to this faster than anyone. She didn't mean to. At least, not consciously. But she learned the pattern. If something went wrong, it didn't stay wrong for long. So her decisions changed. Subtly, she stretched things, took on more than she could handle, assumed things would work out. And they always did. Because I was there. Not visibly, but consistently. That's the thing about invisible support. It doesn't just help people, it reshapes them. By the time I bought my house, the system was already fully built, not discussed, not defined, just understood. I was 26, saved aggressively, worked consistently, made decisions most people my age avoided. No vacations, no unnecessary spending, no shortcuts. Because I wanted something that was mine, not shared, not influenced. Mine. The house wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a small backyard that needed more work than I expected. But it was solid. And more importantly, it was controlled. Every decision, every detail, every improvement. Mine. I replaced the floors myself. Took 3 weekends. Blisters. Mistakes. Adjustments. But when it was done, I knew every inch of that space. I built the shelving in the living room. Measured twice. Cut once. Learned from the first mistake. Fixed the second. Perfected the third. And when I installed the security system, it wasn't about fear. It was about awareness. Front porch camera packages. Backdoor access. Living room center of movement. Not paranoia. Control. Because I've always believed one thing. If you understand the system, you don't need to react to it. You can anticipate it. My parents loved the house. At least, that's what they said. Smart investment. You did this all on your own? We're proud of you. The right words. But something always felt off. Not in what they said, in what they didn't ask. They didn't ask how I did it. Didn't ask what it cost. Didn't ask what I had to give up. Because in their minds, this version of me made sense. The one who handles things. The one who builds things. The one who doesn't struggle. And if you don't struggle, you don't need support. Madison visited the most. At first, it was normal. Coffee, casual conversations, sitting on the couch like any guest would. But over time, the way she moved through the house changed. Less like a visitor, more like someone familiar. She stopped asking where things were, started opening drawers without hesitation, left things behind, picked things up. Small things, easy to ignore, until you stop ignoring them. My mother started making comments, subtle. Madison really likes this place. She feels comfortable here. It's good for her to have somewhere stable. Statements disguised as observations. Positioning, not asking for access. Normalizing it. And I let it happen. Not because I didn't notice, because it didn't feel like a problem. At least not yet. That's how these systems evolve. They don't cross boundaries all at once. They expand them, gradually, until one day, you look around and realize something that used to belong entirely to you no longer feels that way. 8 months before the camera alert, Madison asked for a spare key. Just in case, she said. Emergencies. Convenience. Reasonable. I gave it to her. Not because I had to. Because it made sense. At the time, looking back, that was the moment. Not the betrayal. The setup. Because systems don't fail randomly. They follow patterns. And if you don't interrupt the pattern early, it doesn't stop. It escalates. Sitting in that conference room, watching her stand in my living room, talking about transferring ownership like it was already done, none of it felt sudden. It felt inevitable, like the natural conclusion of something I had allowed to grow unchecked, not because I was weak. Because I was efficient. I solved problems before they became visible. And in doing that, I removed the only thing that forces people to change. Consequences. That's the real danger of being the reliable one. You don't just support the system. You protect it. From breaking, from being questioned, from ever needing to evolve. And eventually, it evolves without you. That's what I was looking at on that screen. Not just my sister in my house, but the final stage of a system I had spent years maintaining, now moving forward, without my permission. And for the first time, I wasn't going to fix it. I was going to study it. Because if they thought I was still playing the same role, they had completely misunderstood the one thing that actually made me dangerous. I don't react. I build. And now, I was about to build something they weren't prepared for. The difference between panic and control is what you do in the first 10 seconds. Most people react. They call. They text. They confront. They try to stop the moment from happening. I didn't. I watched it. Frame by frame. Madison standing in my living room, comfortable, relaxed, certain. That certainty bothered me more than anything else. Because people don't speak like that unless they believe the outcome is already guaranteed. Dad's lawyer is putting it in my name. Not trying, not planning, putting. Language matters, especially when it reveals what someone thinks is already done. I replayed the clip again, this time slower. Not watching her, watching the room. The coffee table slightly shifted. The drawer under the TV open. A folder I didn't recognize placed near the edge. Details. Small, but deliberate. This wasn't a visit. This was a process. I exited the app. Opened my notes. March 12th. Uczonje dpeme. Camera 2. Motion triggered. Subject. Madison. Statement recorded. Dad's lawyer is putting it in my name. Clean. Objective. No assumptions, just facts. Because facts scale, emotion doesn't. The panel ended. People stood up. Started talking. Networking. Normal life continued around me. And I moved with it. Walked out. Nodded at a colleague. Picked up coffee like nothing had shifted. Because externally, nothing had. Internally, everything had. Back in my hotel room, I pulled up the full recording. Not the clip. The entire timeline. I scrolled back. 2:52 p.m. Empty room. 3:01 middags. Front door opens. 3:02 p.m. Madison enters. No hesitation. No pause. She didn't check if anyone was there. Didn't look around cautiously. She walked in like access had already been granted. Because it had, I gave her the key. That part mattered. Because it meant this wasn't forced entry. It was authorized access, used for something unauthorized. That distinction changes everything legally. 3:05 p.m., she moves to the kitchen. Opens cabinets. Takes out a glass. Fills it with water. Routine behavior. Not someone visiting. Someone familiar. 3:09 p.m., she opens the drawer near the TV. Removes documents. Places them on the table. That's when the pattern becomes clear. She wasn't wandering. She was executing steps. 3:12 p.m., phone call begins. And then, the sentence. Dad's lawyer is putting it in my name. I paused the video. Zoomed in. Enhanced audio. Not because I doubted what I heard. Because precision matters. In my field, speech pathology, you don't assume meaning. You confirm it. Same principle here. No interpretation without verification. I exported the clip. Saved 3 copies, local drive, encrypted cloud, external backup. Because if something matters, you don't store it in one place, you protect it. Then I did something most people wouldn't. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Madison. I didn't confront anyone. Because confrontation is emotional. And emotion destroys leverage. Instead, I expanded the system. I checked access logs. Front door smart lock. Entry. 3:01 p.m. Code used. M2. Madison's code. No anomalu. That meant one thing. She wasn't hiding access. She assumed it was allowed. Next, I checked document storage. Everything I kept physically in the house had digital backups. Mortgage, title, purchase agreements. All intact. Unchanged. So whatever they were doing, it wasn't visible yet. That made it worse. Because hidden actions are never spontaneous. They're planned. I sat back. Laptop open. Notes building. Timeline expanding. And for the first time, I asked the question that actually mattered. How long has this been happening? Because nothing about that video felt new. Not the confidence, not the process, not the language. This wasn't the beginning. It was the middle, maybe even the end. I pulled older footage, weeks back, then months. And that's when I saw it. Patterns, repeated visits, same drawer, same documents, same behavior. Not daily. Strategic. Spaced out. Controlled. Which meant this wasn't impulsive. This was systematic. I stopped scrolling. Closed the video. Because at that point, I didn't need more proof. I needed a different kind of input. Professional. Objective. External. I called my attorney, not the one who handled my home purchase, a different one, someone who specialized in property law. Because this wasn't about understanding what happened, it was about understanding what it meant. Walk me through this, he said after I sent the clip. No reaction, no surprise, just analysis. I laid it out. Timeline, access, statement, patterns. He listened, didn't interrupt, then said something that reframed everything. This isn't a misunderstanding. Pause. This is attempted fraud. The word sat there. Fraud. Not conflict. Not family issue. Criminal intent. That changes everything. Emotion disappears. Strategy takes over. What's the exposure? I asked. Depends on execution, he said. If they've filed anything documents, transfers, forged signatures, this escalates quickly. Escalates. Meaning this wasn't the peak. It was just the visible part. I leaned back in my chair, looked at the notes, the timestamps, the clip, and for the first time since seeing the footage, I felt something. Not anger. Not betrayal. Something colder. Recognition. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't emotional. This was structured. Planned. Executed. Which meant I was no longer dealing with family dynamics. I was dealing with a system. And systems don't respond to emotion. They respond to pressure. Legal pressure. Documented pressure. Irreversible pressure. That's when the shift happened. Not from daughter to victim, but from observer to architect. Because if they had spent months building this, they had no idea how long I had spent building something else, something they couldn't see, something they couldn't manipulate, something designed for exactly this kind of moment. I closed my laptop, looked out the hotel window, city lights, movement, distance, and for the first time since this started, everything felt clear. Not what they did. That was obvious now. But what I was going to do next, because they thought they were ahead. They thought they were executing a plan I didn't know about. They thought I was still reacting to life, instead of structuring it, and that assumption, that was their biggest mistake. Because I wasn't going to stop them. Not yet. I was going to let them continue. Document everything. Build the case. Strengthen the position. And when the time came, I wouldn't confront them emotionally. I would end it legally, completely, irreversibly. Because they didn't just walk into my house. They walked into a system they didn't understand. And I built it for moments exactly like this. There's a point when something stops being personal, not because it doesn't hurt, but because emotion becomes inefficient. That's where I was. Sitting in a hotel room, laptop open, evidence organized, patterns identified, and one conclusion that couldn't be ignored anymore. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't Madison overstepping. This was coordinated, which meant one thing. I wasn't dealing with a person. I was dealing with a system. And systems don't get fixed. They get dismantled. The first step wasn't confrontation. It was expansion. If they had been building something for months, then what I had seen so far was only the surface. So I went deeper. Bank records, property tax notifications, any external signal tied to ownership. Because fraud doesn't exist in isolation. It leaves traces. And those traces always connect to something official. Nothing at first. Which was expected. Because smart fraud doesn't show up early. It waits until the structure is complete. Then it executes all at once. Transfer, signature, filing, done, clean. That's what they were aiming for. So I changed the approach. Instead of looking for what had happened, I started looking for what was about to happen. I called the county recorder's office, not to report anything, to monitor activity. Any pending filings tied to this property? I asked. A pause. Typing. No filings yet, the clerk said. Yet. That word mattered. Because it confirmed something critical. They weren't finished. Which meant I still had time. Most people would have acted right then. Shut it down. Locked everything. Confronted immediately. But that would have been a mistake. Because stopping them early would protect the house, but it wouldn't expose the system. And if you don't expose the system, it rebuilds. So I waited. Not passively. Strategically. I expanded the cameras. Not visibly. Additional angles. Higher resolution. Backup recording channels. Because if they were going to move forward, I wanted everything. Not just proof. context, who, when, how, and most importantly, how confident they were. Confidence reveals intent, and intent determines outcome. 3 days later, another alert. Camera 2, same time window. I didn't rush this time. Opened it slower. Because now, this wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. Madison again. But she wasn't alone. My mother Diane walked in behind her, carrying a folder. That changed everything. Because now, this wasn't just access. It was participation. They moved differently this time. Less casual. More focused. Madison cleared the table. Diane opened the folder. Documents, multiple pages, placed carefully, aligned, prepared. I leaned closer to the screen, zoomed in, not enough to read everything, but enough to recognize format. Legal. Structured. Not random paperwork. Then Diane said something that removed all doubt. We just need the witness signature. Then it's done. Done. That word again. I paused the video. Didn't replay it. Didn't need to. Because now the timeline was clear. They weren't planning. They were finalizing. I called my attorney again. Sent the second clip. This time, his response was immediate. Do not confront them. I wasn't planning to. If they complete this, he continued, we move from attempted fraud to executed fraud. Pause, which is easier to prosecute. That's when the strategy locked in. Not stopping them, letting them finish. Because the difference between suspicion and proof is completion. Are you sure you're comfortable with that? He asked. Comfortable. Interesting word. Because nothing about this was comfortable. But comfort wasn't the goal. Clarity was. I'm sure, I said. After the call, I sat in silence, not thinking about them. Thinking about timing. Because once they crossed that line, everything would accelerate. Legal action, charges, exposure. There would be no going back. Not for them. Not for us. And that's when it hit me. Not emotionally. Structurally. This wasn't just about protecting my house. It was about redefining my role. Because for years, I had been the one who fixed things quietly, resolved problems before they became visible, protected everyone from consequences. And now, for the first time, I was doing the opposite. I was allowing consequences to exist fully. That shift was bigger than anything they were doing, because it meant I wasn't just reacting to this situation. I was breaking the pattern that made it possible. The next few days were quiet. No alerts, no movement, which meant one thing. They were preparing, finalizing, getting ready to execute. And I let them. Watched, recorded, built. Because when the moment came, I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain. I wasn't going to defend. I was going to present facts, evidence, timeline, intent, everything they had built, laid out in front of them, not emotionally, legally, because they thought they were rewriting ownership. But what they were really doing was building a case against themselves. And the only reason they got that far was because they never realized I had already stopped being part of their system. And once you step outside a system, you don't fix it. You expose it. And that's exactly what I was about to do. I didn't confront them immediately. That's what they expected. Emotion, shock, reaction, a call, a message, a confrontation they could redirect, deny, or manipulate. But I didn't give them that. Because confrontation without leverage is just noise. And I wasn't interested in noise. I was interested in finality. They completed the transfer attempt on a Thursday, 11:42 a.m. I know because the filing hit the system 12 minutes later. My attorney called before I even checked. They did it. No emotion. Just confirmation. They filed a new deed. Your name replaced. Transfer recorded. A pause. And it's fraudulent. That was the moment everything shifted. Not emotionally, legally. Because up until then, this was a plan. Now, it was a crime. Next step, I asked? Now we move, he said. Not aggressively. Precisely. By 2 p.m., everything was in motion. Formal complaint filed. Fraud documentation submitted. Emergency injunction requested. Every piece of evidence I had collected, timestamps, footage, access logs, audio, structured into something undeniable. Because that's the difference between knowing something happened and proving it. At 4:17 p.m., I sent one message to my mother. Saturday, 10 a.m., my house, be there. No explanation, no emotion, just instruction. She responded in 3 minutes. What is this about? I didn't reply. Because if they didn't already know, that was part of the problem. Saturday morning came without tension. That's what surprised me. No anxiety, no anger, just clarity. Because by that point, this wasn't a conversation, it was a conclusion. They arrived together. My mother, Diane, my father, Robert, my sister, Madison. Same formation as always. But something was different, subtle. They didn't walk in like they owned the space. Not anymore. Because somewhere between Thursday and Saturday, they realized something had shifted. They just didn't know how much. I didn't greet them, didn't offer coffee, didn't sit casually. I was already at the table, laptop open, documents printed, everything laid out, not aggressively. Precisely. Sit, I said. They did. No resistance, because tone matters, and mine didn't invite discussion. For a moment, no one spoke, because silence, in the right context, is pressure. Then my mother tried. Rachel, we don't understand what. I turned the laptop toward them. Pressed play. The first clip, Madison, living room. Dad's lawyer is putting it in my name. No commentary, no explanation, just evidence. The room changed. Not dramatically, but completely. Because denial requires uncertainty. And there was none. My father leaned forward, watching. Not reacting, processing. I played the second clip. Diane, at the table, we just need the witness signature. Then it's done. Then I stopped the video, closed the laptop, and let the silence sit. Madison spoke first. This isn't what it looks like. Of course it wasn't. Because what it looked like was already enough. I didn't respond. I reached for the documents, slid them across the table. Recorded deed, I said. Filed Thursday, 11:40, 2 a.m. My father picked it up. His hands weren't steady. That mattered. Forgery analysis, I continued. Signature mismatch. Witness inconsistency. Filing irregularities. No emotion. Just facts. This is insane, Madison said. Not scared. Defensive. Still trying to control the narrative. I looked at her. Direct. Unmoving. And said the one thing that ended that version of the conversation completely. This is criminal. Silence. Not the kind you can fill. The kind that locks everything in place. My mother shifted, trying a different approach. Rachel, we were just trying to. No, I said. Calm. Flat. You weren't trying. A pause. You did. That distinction matters. Because trying leaves room for interpretation. Did doesn't. My father finally spoke. Quiet. What do you want? There it was. Not denial. Not defense. Recognition. Of position. I leaned back slightly. Not relaxed. Controlled. I've already filed a complaint, I said. 3 reactions. Madison shock. Diane fear. Robert understanding. Forgery. Fraud. Conspiracy, I continued. Each word placed carefully. Because words define reality. The lawyer involved is already under review. Another shift. Because now, this wasn't contained. You don't get to fix this quietly, I said. Looking directly at my mother, like everything else. That hit. Not loudly, but deeply, because it connected the present to the pattern. Madison stood up. This is insane. You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't react. Because escalation is emotional, and I was done playing that role. I'm not blowing anything out of proportion, I said. Calm. Precise. I'm documenting exactly what happened. She looked at my father, waiting. For support. For intervention. For the system to restore itself. It didn't. Because, for the first time, the system wasn't in control anymore. I stood up. Slowly. Not to dominate. To conclude. I have a family, I said. A pause. Measured. Intentional. You're just not in it. No yelling. No emotion. Just truth. And that's what made it irreversible. Because anger fades. But clarity doesn't. The aftermath wasn't loud. No screaming calls. No dramatic confrontations. Just silence. But not the same silence as before. This one had weight. Because for the first time, they knew I wasn't coming back to fix it. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Not because I pushed it, Because the evidence did. Forgery cases don't rely on emotion. They rely on precision. Signatures that don't match, witnesses that don't exist, timelines that don't align. And in this case, everything was documented. Every clip, every timestamp, every word they thought no one would hear turned into something undeniable. The lawyer they used was the first to fall. License suspended within 2 weeks. Not permanently, but enough to confirm one thing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was misconduct. Madison was next. Not arrested, but charged, fraud-related. Light enough to avoid prison, heavy enough to follow her. That's how consequences work. They don't always destroy you. They stay with you, quietly, permanently. My parents tried to reach out. At first, indirectly, texts that avoided the situation, calls that sounded normal, messages that acted like nothing had changed. Hey, just checking in. We miss you. Let's talk. But none of them said the one thing that mattered. We were wrong, because acknowledging that would require dismantling the entire system. And most people don't choose truth when comfort is still an option. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, out of alignment, because responding would reopen something I had already closed. And closure isn't about what you say. It's about what you stop participating in. A month later, I went back to the house, alone. The same house they tried to take. Nothing had changed physically. Same floors, same shelves, same light hitting the living room in the late afternoon. But it felt different. Not violated. Not broken. Clear. Because, for the first time, there was no confusion about what this place represented. It wasn't shared. It wasn't influenced. It wasn't open to interpretation. It was mine. I walked through each room slowly, not checking for damage, reclaiming space, because ownership isn't just legal. It's psychological, and until you feel it again, something still feels off. The guest room was the last place I stopped, the one Madison used when she stayed over. Clothes still in the closet. A few things left behind. Unintentional, or maybe not. I didn't pack them, didn't send them back. I left them there, not as a reminder, as evidence of what happens when you let people stay too long in a space they were never meant to own. That night, I sat in the living room, lights off, just the reflection of the street outside. And for the first time since this started, I thought about how I felt. Not what I knew, not what I planned, what I felt. And the answer surprised me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. I didn't even feel relieved. I felt accurate, like something that had been slightly off for years had finally corrected itself. Because here's the truth. You can't feel betrayed by people who were always consistent. You can only feel betrayed by your own expectation that they would be different. And that realization, it removes the emotion, not by suppressing it, by resolving it. The next morning, I made one final change. I removed their access, all of it. Door codes, emergency contacts, shared permissions, everything. Not aggressively, systematically, like closing accounts that were no longer valid. And that was it. No announcement, no explanation, just done. A few days later, my mother sent one last message. I don't understand how things got this far. I read it once, then put my phone down, because the answer was simple. It didn't get this far. It was always here, just unseen. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have something to say, because understanding isn't something you give someone. It's something they choose to face. Weeks passed, then months, and life moved forward. Not dramatically, but cleanly, without interruptions, without hidden variables, without a system quietly running in the background. That depended on me to function. That's the part no one prepares you for. When you remove yourself from something toxic, you expect chaos. You expect collapse. But most of the time, you just get silence. And in that silence, you finally hear something you've been missing for years. Yourself, without distortion, without expectation, without pressure. Just you. And once you experience that, you don't go back. Not because you can't, because you finally understand what it was costing you to stay. The hardest part wasn't what they did. It wasn't the footage. It wasn't the fraud. It wasn't even sitting across from them, watching everything collapse in real time. The hardest part was what came after. Because once the system is gone, you're left with something most people don't know how to handle. Silence, not the kind filled with tension, the kind that doesn't ask anything from you. No expectations, no roles, no invisible responsibilities waiting to be handled. Just space. And if you've spent years being the reliable one, that space feels unfamiliar. Not empty, unassigned. For the first few weeks, I caught myself reaching for things that weren't there anymore. Checking my phone, expecting a problem, reviewing my accounts, anticipating a gap, mentally scanning for something that needed to be fixed. Nothing. No emergencies. No quiet obligations. No system running in the background that depended on me to function. Just stillness. And that stillness forced something I had avoided for years, looking at my life without context. Because for a long time, my identity wasn't built on who I was. It was built on what I handled. The one who fixes things, the one who stabilizes situations, the one who absorbs pressure so no one else has to. That role made me valuable, but it also made me predictable. And predictable people get used, not always intentionally, but consistently. So when that role disappeared, I had to answer a question I had never actually asked myself before. Who am I? If I'm not solving someone else's problems? At first, there wasn't a clear answer. And that's the part most people avoid. Because uncertainty feels like loss. Even when what you lost was something that was costing you. I didn't rush to fill it. That was the difference this time. No new commitments. No replacement responsibilities. No attempt to recreate structure just to feel stable again. I let the space exist. And slowly, something started to take shape. Not a new role, a new standard. I stopped making decisions based on who needed me. Started making them based on what made sense. Not emotionally, strategically. The same way I approached everything else in my life. Except now, the system I was building was centered around me. I redesigned my routines, not for efficiency, for alignment. Work that mattered, time that wasn't fragmented, decisions that didn't require justification. And for the first time, there was no internal negotiation, no voice asking, how will this affect them? Because the answer no longer mattered. I made changes to the house, not renovations. Reassignments. The guest room became an office, not symbolic. Functional. Because that space was no longer for temporary occupancy. It was for ownership. My ownership. The porch swing my mother used twice, gone. Replaced with a bench I actually used. Not sentimental. Accurate. Because the house no longer needed to reflect them. It needed to reflect me. That's the real shift people don't talk about. When you remove toxic dynamics, you don't just lose people. You lose the version of yourself that was built around accommodating them. And rebuilding that version takes intention. A month later, I ran into someone unexpected. Pam, my neighbor, 72, widowed, lives 2 houses down. She had been there longer than I had. Saw the renovations, watched the patterns. Noticed things I didn't think anyone was paying attention to. You look different, she said. Not curious, observant. I am, I replied. She nodded. Didn't ask what happened. Didn't ask why. Just said, good. That was it. No analysis, no assumptions, just recognition. And strangely, that felt more honest than anything my family had said in years. We started talking more after that. Not deeply. Consistently. Coffee on Sundays. Short conversations in the driveway. Simple exchanges that didn't carry weight. And that's when I realized something I hadn't considered before. Connection doesn't require history. It requires presence. Pam never needed anything from me. Never expected anything. Never positioned me into a role. And because of that, I could show up as myself, not as the reliable one, not as the practical one, just Rachel. That difference, it changes how you experience people, because when you're not being used, you can finally choose. Months passed, life stabilized, not artificially, naturally. No sudden breakthroughs, no dramatic transformations, just consistency. And consistency built something stronger than anything I had before. Trust. Not in other people, in myself. Because for the first time, I knew something with absolute clarity. I could walk away. Not emotionally. Structurally. Without hesitation. Without guilt. Without needing permission. And that changes everything. Because once you know you can leave, you stop tolerating things that require you to. The last message from my family came months later. Short. Careful. We hope you're doing well. No demands, no expectations, just distance. And for the first time, that distance felt appropriate, not sad, accurate. I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't need to. That's the final stage most people never reach. Not anger, not forgiveness, indifference, not cold, clear. Because when something no longer controls your decisions, it no longer defines your life. And that's where I am now. Not rebuilding, not recovering, just living. Without a system I didn't choose, without roles I didn't agree to, without expectations I never questioned. Because in the end, this was never about the house. It was about ownership, not legal ownership, personal ownership of my time, my energy, my identity. And once you take that back, there's nothing left for anyone else to steal. People think the ending of a story like this is the confrontation. The moment you expose everything, the moment they realize what they've done, the moment the power shifts, it's not. That's just the turning point. The real ending is what happens after you stop needing them to understand it. A year later, nothing about my life looked dramatic. No headlines, no visible transformation, no external proof that anything significant had changed. And yet, everything had, not around me, inside me, because the most important shift wasn't that I had taken control of the situation. It was that I had stopped defining myself by it. For years, my identity had been built around one idea: be useful, solve problems, anticipate needs, stabilize everything before it breaks. And if you do that well enough, people depend on you. And if they depend on you long enough, they stop seeing you, not intentionally, structurally, because you're no longer a person, you're a function. That's what I had been. Not just to them, to myself. And when that function disappeared, I had two choices: rebuild it somewhere else, or let it go completely. Most people choose the first. They leave one system and recreate the same role in a different one. New environment, same pattern, different people, same expectations. Because it feels familiar. And familiarity feels safe. I didn't do that. Not because I was stronger, because I was tired. Tired of being needed more than I was known. Tired of being valued for what I could handle, instead of who I was. So I chose something harder. I chose to be unnecessary. At first, that felt like losing value. Because when no one needs you, you question what you bring, what you offer, what you are. But over time, that feeling changes. Because you start to realize something most people never fully understand. Being needed is not the same as being valued. And once you separate those two things, everything becomes clearer. I stopped saying yes automatically, not as a rule, as a filter. If something didn't align, I didn't justify it. I declined it. No explanation, no negotiation, just decision. That shift was small on the surface, but structurally, it changed everything. Because boundaries aren't about controlling other people. They're about defining yourself. And once you define yourself clearly, people either adjust or they disappear. Some did. Not dramatically, quietly. Less messages, less invitations, less presence, and for the first time, I didn't try to compensate for it. Didn't reach out, didn't repair, didn't rebalance the dynamic. Because not every connection is meant to continue. Some are meant to end, once you stop playing the role that made them possible. My family became one of those connections, not completely gone, but no longer central. Occasional updates, neutral conversations, no dependency, no expectations. And that distance, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like accuracy. The house changed too, not in structure, in meaning. It was no longer something I had to protect from them, because I had already protected myself. And once you do that, everything else becomes easier to manage. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room, same spot where I had watched the footage for the first time, same table, same light, but a completely different perspective. Because back then, I thought the problem was what they were doing. Now I understood. The problem was what I had allowed for years before that. Not because I was weak, because I was efficient. I removed friction, solved problems, maintained stability. And in doing that, I removed the only thing that forces people to respect boundaries, consequences. That's the real lesson. Not about them. About me. If you solve everything for people, they don't become grateful. They become dependent. And dependency, without awareness, turns into entitlement. That's what I ended, not the relationship. The pattern. And once the pattern was gone, everything else either adjusted or disappeared, exactly as it should. Now, when I think about that night, that first clip, that sentence, Dad's lawyer is putting it in my name. I don't feel anger. I don't feel betrayal. I feel clarity, because that moment didn't destroy anything real. It revealed what was already there. And once something is revealed, you don't have to fight it. You just have to decide whether you're going to keep participating in it. I didn't. And that decision was the real ending, not the confrontation, not the legal outcome, not the separation. The moment I stopped being the version of myself that made all of it possible. Because in the end, nothing they did was as powerful as what I chose to stop doing. And once you reach that point, you don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't even need them to understand. You just need one thing: the ability to walk away without looking back and know that this time you're not leaving something behind. You're finally choosing yourself.